For a hammer, everything is a nail. For me, I'm a leadership scholar. Every problem in the world is about leadership, really. The reason why we're so behind and we're not meeting, Sustainable Development Goal, all 17 of them is about leadership. Bad leadership, that is. That's why I'm going to talk about, and I'm very passionate about, leadership crisis in the world and our role in it, actually, to make it and then to hopefully get out of this crisis. So is there a leadership crisis in the world? This is from World Economic Forum 2015. And if you ask this question again, I'm sure the answer yes to this question is even more. Almost unanimously in every region of the world, people think that there is a pervasive leadership crisis in the world. And this is a cross-cultural similarity that you see, not a difference really. And when we look at the recent books, for example, A Myth of Strong Leadership, What is Wrong with Leadership, and the fun one, Why Do So Many Incompetent Men Become Leaders? And How to Fix It. And the author is a male, a very well-respected leadership scholar. So now in the literature, we see a lot of such books to talk about leadership crisis. There is extremely low trust to leaders, to institutions who lead societies as well. So institutional trust is low, and every other trust is very, very low. Here are some statistics I put together for leadership crisis in the work context, because I'm not a political psychologist or a political scientist, so I don't deal with leadership at the societal level. I look at leadership at the organizational level, but I think you can generalize, and I have to give some examples from political leaders because they're the most visible ones. But at the work level or at the organizational level, work context, leaders with high leadership talent is only 18%, according to a Gallup survey, worldwide survey actually. So, I mean, how is this possible? People we choose for leadership positions or managership positions are competent only 18% of the time. New managers failing within 24 months. 60% of new managers fail in their role in the first 2 years. Employees who trust leaders are only 21%. Employees leaving the organization due to bad leadership, bad managers, are 57%. Organizations with a leadership gap, that is emergence and effectiveness, which I'm going to talk about, are very, very high. So in other words, who emerges as a leader, who we select as leaders, do not become effective leaders. And that gap is very, very high. Cost of poor leadership is extremely high. This is the US data. Leaders considering leaving due to their burnout. So leaders themselves are not happy with the, with their job as well. So there is a pervasive leadership crisis. And when we look at the kind of the definition of leadership, I'd like to share with you, maybe some of you know about the standard almost definition of leadership by Globe Research, which is a collaborative cross-cultural, cross-country type of research. Leadership is defined as the ability, this is a very interesting definition, please pay attention because I'm going to come back to it. Ability of an individual to influence, motivate, and enable others to contribute toward the effectiveness and success of an organization within which of which they're members. Very standard definition, but there are a lot of things about, there are a lot of things that are wrong about this definition. First of all, it just mentions one individual, an individual doing, being responsible for a lot of things. And my problem is that, and the leadership crisis is that this person that we, appoint as leaders may be very, very wrong. So wrong people emerge as this one person to lead us. And the other side of the problem is that right people, maybe better leaders, better people, actually shy away from this responsibility. They hide behind the doors, and they don't emerge, or they don't appear in our radar. We just miss people, and because they're not willing to get into the leadership leadership domain. So there are therefore two sides of the problem. We keep having wrong people for leadership positions, and the right people don't want to become leaders. And this is equally an important problem. Now, speaking about the first problem, wrong people emerging as leaders, let's look at one of the meta-analyses that I very much like about who emerges as a leader. In the leadership literature, what it means is that who is perceived as leader-like? Who do we perceive as, as leader, and we say, oh, okay, this person can be really very good. So, for example, masculinity, these are, the highlighted characteristics are the ones which has the highest p-value. So for example, masculinity, if a person is masculine, the person can be male or a female, it doesn't matter, female with a masculine trait. Masculinity, antagonism, and authoritarianism, these three traits, make this person appear in our minds, in our eyes, as leader-like. Plus intelligence, creativity, and extraversion. So these people are not only masculine, antagonistic, authoritarian, who we trust as leaders, but they're also sociable, creative, and intelligent, and they know how to, make an impression on us, unfortunately. So that is kind of a deadly combination when you think about it, and there are many leaders, world leaders included, unfortunately, that fits this bill. And it's very, very easy for people to judge someone as leader-like. Some research by Todorov and colleagues from MIT, for example, shows that even by looking at the facial expression, even small children at the age of 3 can make a judgment about who will become a leader of a group, for example. So if we can just animate this video, you can see that, the strong appearing facial expression, suggests that the person may be a leader. And more like, naive, kind of soft-looking expression. If people, even children, when they see that soft-looking expression, they would say, absolutely not. This person cannot be a leader. About competence as well, again, facial expression or facial features. Features of the face, eyes towards the ear and eyes towards the nose. This person is perceived to be less competent, for example, versus the other side is perceived to be competent. So even the physical features, the height, the facial expressions, not expressions even, facial features can make anybody, influence our judgments very fast. For example, again, a manipulation from the same group of researchers, a kind of a baby face, soft-looking male versus a very tough-looking male, the same, obviously, image manipulated for experimental reasons. Of course, the ones who are on the right-hand side are perceived to be better leaders. So antagonistic, masculine, conflictual, authoritarian, and in this case, also competent because of the eye, competent appearing, for example. So we make these judgments very, very fast. Oh, I'm sorry that the title is not visible completely. It says, Mind the Gap. And that is the same, that's not the same gap, of course, of we heard about in the morning in the keynote, Pat Dengen's keynote. Close the gap, she says, right? I also say the same thing, close the gap, because in this case, the gap is between who is perceived as a leader and actually who is effective as a leader are two different things. Look at who is perceived as leader, based on many, many research that I didn't cite here, that looks similar to the meta-analysis that I showed. So who do we perceive as leader-like? Confident appearing people, charismatic people, people who play organizational politics, emerge as, capable people, people who pursue personal agenda, self-interest, masculine people, extroverted, social, and paternalistic. leader are perceived to be effective leaders, perceived to be. So they're capable of getting themselves elected or appointed for these positions. However, once they are in the positions, unfortunately, these characteristics do not translate into effectiveness. For leaders to be effective, another set of characteristics are required. Again, this is based on research. And this is not competent appearing people, but competent people. We need competent people. We need humble people learning from failures. There is very good research on introverted. In a minute, I'm going to come back to this. But humble, introverted, good listeners rather than good speakers. For example, there is a book by Susan Cain on the power of introverts in a world that cannot stop talking. She talks about the power of introverts and more listening and less talking, for example. Team-oriented people, team builders, and people who maintain teams. Sabah just talked about, having committees and having students, building strong teams like that, for example, is a winning combination for good leadership. Continuous learning and development, shared leadership, crisis management. So if you compare the list in the left-hand side and right-hand side, this is really, this concerns me a lot because we don't look at these characteristics when we appoint people, especially humility, introversion, team-orientedness, shared leadership. In some cultures especially, these types of people are perceived to be weak, they don't deserve the position, they cannot be trusted, they cannot be listened and stuff like that. So we have to mind this gap and absolutely close this gap. So that was the first part of the problem. We are gravitated towards wrong people for leadership positions, and we appoint them, we trust them, we vote for them, we select them, and they become a disaster. As you've seen in the second slide actually, which I showed, 18% of success rate, the rest is the failure. And that was a very big survey. That was the first part of the problem. The second part of the problem, which my research is about, is how come we miss the right people, not just miss, but how come we cannot convince the right type of people on this right-hand side, people who are humble, team-oriented, introvert listeners, shared leaders and stuff like that. How come they're not getting into the leadership path? Right people, why are they feeling reluctant to lead? Why are they worried about leadership? And these are the concepts that I kind of introduced to the literature, which I'm going to talk about. Why? What is the reluctance about? And I've been playing with those ideas in 2014 and around that time, based on my personal experiences, because at the time I was invited to become the dean, the vice president, many high-level positions in my university, and I was like completely in panic mode, basically. And I was absolutely devastated, with the thought of it. And I said, there's something wrong. I mean, maybe other people would not feel that way. We will jump into the opportunity and what have you. What's going on with me? And I felt some avoidance of these positions, avoidance, I wanted people not to see me for these positions as a viable candidate. I was really literally hiding, actually. And I was, I was visiting Harvard at the time, and the business school, dean of business school is also a leadership scholar. He said, what are you working on? And I said, I'm kind of playing with the idea of a new concept called worries about leading, worries about leadership. He said, there is no such thing. I mean, nobody worries about becoming a leader. Nobody avoids leadership positions. It's a career killer. Don't do it. He said, just drop the idea. Everybody wants to become a leader. Okay, so there is nothing there. then I said, okay, maybe, but I pursued my interest. And then I come across this interview of Amanpour with a long-lasting parliamentarian in the British Parliament. So I was just zapping. I saw this interview. This woman was talking about why not. She wanted to lead the Labour Party at the time. And I said, I'm not the only one experiencing this, avoidance and not wanting to have it. Let's have a look, just 1 minute, if I can play it. Yes, it goes in like that. So she says, when it came to that moment, what was happening in that moment? I was crazy to know about it. What happens in that moment? Because I had the same experience when I was offered the positions. I was like literally getting into a panic mode, literally. Panic attack, maybe even. So what's happening in that mode? So remember I said, the Harvard Business School dean said, there's no such thing. And then I left my visiting position at Harvard. And then the next thing I see is that they have done a survey. Thank you very much for me almost, They asked the question, Harvard Business School asked the question, who wants to become promoted into leadership? And only 34% said, yes, I want to promote to leadership. Only 34%, 34%. And the C-level leadership, it was only 6%, the top-level leadership, only 6%. So I wasn't dreaming. It was this interview, a Amanpour interview that I've seen, the survey I've seen. I said, there is something there. I'm not dreaming about it. So I came up with the idea of worries about leadership, shortly called WALL. And I did extensive research to conceptualize it, qualitative, quantitative, experimental, 4 studies actually, developing a measure of it, validating it, extensive research in my lab. And it got rejected by many of the top American journals. 5 times or so I got rejections. It was a novel idea and nobody thought that, it's viable. I mean, this is not possible. Nobody is worried about leadership, just drop the idea. I defined it as worries about, so it's an anticipated emotion. So people cannot almost regulate their emotions. They're not able to regulate their emotions because at the time when it happens, when it is offered, when the time came that it is offered, that the thinking about the possibility of all the negative consequences of accepting the role. And they might be worried, and these are the 3 dimensions that I propose: worries about performance. What if I cannot perform well in this role? Worries about harm. What if I harm people in my role? And what if I get harm as well? And worries about work-life imbalance. What if my work and life balance completely abolishes. So we finally published this book in the European Journal, European Management Review, and it got where European academics or journals were more receptive of this idea. American journals somehow did not, they all probably believe that leadership is an honor and everybody should and must strive for it. But European journals or cultures maybe are more receptive to the possibility that not everyone should want it. Therefore, it got published, it got the top-loaded article award and all that. So very few cross-cultural aspects I was able to examine so far. Some interviews I conducted with my master's student from the Global Minds program. So for example, she visited many countries to do these interviews, asking about worries about leadership, concept. How much time? Okay. For example, one of the interviews, one of the quotes from a Chinese expatriate in Germany who was able to compare German and Chinese cultures said, in Europe, I think personality and affinity to lead and control other people have a bigger influence on predicting who would actually accept a leadership position than in China. Who accepts a leadership position? Probably that's what they were talking about. Japanese society has given weight to consensual decision-making and has found less importance in leadership for at least 150 years and hasn't adopted the elite education system. So Japanese people tend to find the importance of followership more than leadership. This quote says from a Chinese professional, worries about work-life balance, work-life imbalance is not an important thing for Chinese society because they work for the family, and therefore that aspect of the worries about work-life balance aspect is not relevant. And in Korea, it's easier for me to lead because I get more respect for my employees. In Germany, typically managers work more hours than their employees. They definitely have a tough job. But here in Korea, I think the managers have a lot of freedom. So therefore, they want to become leaders. So different aspects we discussed in those interviews about wanting to get leadership, not wanting to get leadership, some cross-country, cross-cultural differences, but that work needs to continue. Actually, the cross-cultural aspects need to be investigated further. Later on, I developed an intervention program using AI to prepare people for these positions, especially for those who have high worries about leadership, who are reluctant to accept these positions, because one of the reluctances is about managing their emotions. You know, what if they cannot, you know, managing their worries and emotions when, especially dealing with people, dealing with difficult issues, asking difficult questions. So I developed an AI-based simulation, leadership simulation. This is at a prototype stage right now. Did the initial experimental work with it. And here is just a few minutes of an idea. This is me acting as a manager of this avatar. We are engaging in a natural conversation. We trained avatar to engage in a difficult conversation with us. And after doing the simulation, people receive feedback. Actually, this is the idea, basically, just to see a few minutes, 1-2 minutes of it. This is a difficult employee of mine in the role play. Thank you. Okay, so it goes on and on and on like this. He's very defensive. This is a very difficult conversation to lead. He doesn't take responsibility. And of course, people like myself, reluctant people are reluctant to deal with people like those. So if we can give them the opportunity to practice these conversations and give feedback as to how to manage these conversations, difficult conversations, perhaps people can be more courageous to take leadership roles. So we provide feedback reports. We provided feedback reports in 3 ways. After the simulation, we looked at, during the simulation, actually, we're assessing their physiological arousal, physiological stress levels. So we're looking at the heart rate variability, skin conductance. We also look at the displayed emotion, like facial expression, what kind of emotions they display. And we also collect self-reported emotions. So these 3 types of emotional expression we assess. It's a 6-week simulation, actually. Every week they have to deal with a different avatar, and we provide feedback to people. And we find out that at the end of the simulation, and compared to the control group, their worries about leadership, their worries really diminishes thanks to a kind of a practice and feedback based on this. So therefore, when we go back to the definition of leadership, the ability of an individual to influence, motivate, enable others, remember, towards an organizational goal, we think that maybe it's time to really think about or redefine leadership, because maybe part of the problem is how we define leadership. If we define leadership like this, an individual making it happen, then people inevitably feel reluctant and burdened and unsure and worried all around, right? So maybe there is a problem on our definition of leadership. So I kind of dare to redefine leadership in this giant leadership literature. I'm daring to do that. And it's going to be hopefully published in 2026 in a book by Cambridge University Press. So the new definition is leadership is the collective and ethical process. So it's not just an individual doing it, but it's a process of creating the conditions under which people can learn, contribute, and adapt together by fostering competence, shared accountability, humility, and relational trust in pursuit of not just organizational bottom line or goals, pursuit of purposeful and responsible progress. Not all progress is good. We need responsible growth, responsible progress, not at the expense of environment, not at the expense of people. So this is what I'm kind of humbly offering to the literature and everyone about a leadership definition. In IACCP, I received this very important quotation. What are they called? These things are called, you guys know. Trophy, I think, but it's not exactly a trophy. From the past president, he passed it on to me, this definition and this trophy. I have it in my office. Every day I look at it, and I'm going to pass it to the next president. And it says IACCP president or leadership is such that the greatest leaders for us are not the ones necessarily those who do the greatest things, one person doing everything greatly, blah, blah, blah. But they are the ones who get the people to do the greatest things. So this is how we in IACCP define leadership and try to practice it really. And as such, again, you cannot see it, it says leadership in IACCP. As such, we do have a shared leadership understanding within IACCP. We have officers, we have regional representatives, we have a very collaborative, distributive leadership understanding. We consult each other in decision making and what have you. So we're very proud of that. We can be very slow sometimes, but I think we can also progress in that too, but we don't compromise from consultation and participation and inclusivity. So this is our understanding of leadership. To conclude, as I said, SDGs, we cannot make them happen with the type of leadership that we have. If we keep selecting the wrong people, if the right people keep hiding behind the doors. So leadership is in crisis. Leadership crisis is real and very costly, very, very costly. I'm not just talking about financial cost. Financial cost is nothing, but environmental cost. It's a direct threat to our livelihood as humans. The crisis stems from who we perceive as leaders or leader-like and who does not enter into our radar. We have to, work on both of these issues. There are individual level interventions like the one that I talked about to encourage people to become leaders and better leaders, but there are also systemic, structural, and cultural work that needs to be done, hopefully, with all of us. Presidential addresses are not designed to accept questions, unfortunately. We wish I can talk to you about your presentation as well. I'm sure, Sabah, we wish we had more interactive discussions, but please, we are here in the next few days, of course. If there are any comments, any questions about any of our presentations, please feel free to approach us. And thank you very much for your attention.